Welcome to the Welcome to the Surface Navy Association's Facebook Live, continuing the conversation. Today we've got a really exciting session. This will be on Sea Duty, Coast Guard Sea Duty, and CG1. But before I launch into that and introduce the guests, I want to talk about SNA, Surface Navy Association. It is a 501c3 nonprofit. It encompasses both the Navy and the Coast Guard. In fact, the Coast Guard is the largest growing group within Surface Navy. So we want all the Coasties out there to embrace this organization and become members. What's in it for you? It's all of the programs are focused on mentorship. So you get mentored, and also professional development. For instance, all of those young bosun mates out there and other people that might want to get their captain's license. Well, Surface Navy Association actually has an unlisted grant where you may be eligible to get that grant. And just that alone is way worth the cost of admission. So please think about it. And it enhances and preserves all of our heritage in the sea or the surface naval forces. So today we've got Master Chief of the Coast Guard, number 8, my mentor, Vince Patton. How you doing, Vince?
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here.
He's down in Orlando, folks. And if you ever want to retire right, you got to retire like Vince because he's down there golfing. But today,
I'm not retired.
Time out to join us. We also have Rear Admiral Eric Jones with CG1, recently a longtime Surface Navy Association supporter, even longer time cutterman. He's a probably one of the most senior cuttermen in the Coast Guard. We also have Captain Laura Collins she is the deputy in civilian HR, and she also works in the diversity programs there. But Captain Collins has a long history as a cutterman. She's been on many ships. Recently, she was out in Pac area. I actually made some phone calls and working with her on some of the commissionings out there. So very excited to have Captain Collins aboard today. So the very first, we'll just dive right into it if it's okay with our panelists, and throwing this out there. Okay, the value proposition of sea duty for the member and the importance of filling sea assignments for the organization. So what's the value proposition for Coasties that want to be or are thinking about sea as a lifelong commitment in the Coast Guard? And what is the importance for the organization? Captain or Admiral Jones, we'll go with you first, sir.
Hey, thanks so much for the question, Master Chief, and thanks to you and Master Chief Patton for having us here today. Great softball to serve right in the first inning here. The value proposition.
Softball, sir.
Bottom line is, look, the Coast Guard first and foremost is a maritime service. You know, any challenge that a nation faces, in this case, the United States, we handle that issue when it occurs on the water or interfaces with the water. And so being able to be a cutterman is being able to contribute right on that front, whether it's enabling commerce and all the economic benefits that come from it, whether it's protecting the maritime borders, or if it's protecting the resources, both mineral and living resources that are in the maritime. Those chances to be on the water and carry out the missions that protect the nation and its resources are a great, satisfying career to have. What, as an individual, as a cutterman, being a cutterman affords you the opportunity for command at a very junior time in your career. Since most cuttermen really only need to go to sea once per rank, it opens up a lot of room to broaden yourself into larger Coast Guard career areas, whether it's training personnel, intelligence, defense operations. So it really gets you command early and it helps you build up those leadership skills as you progress through the organization. I would say both for the individual and for the service, that is what I would tell you is the value proposition of going to sea in the Coast Guard. Captain Collins?
Thanks, Admiral. I appreciate your answer. I think I'll complement your answer a little bit with some simple sailor language around going to sea as a individual. What's an individual proposition? I think, you know, people who have a sense of adventure are going to love going to sea. People who have want to seek meaning, purpose, belonging, being part of a terrific team, doing amazing work. That's the call. I think that's the value proposition to your average young person. It's exactly, I know you and I were speaking the other day, Admiral, about like reminiscing. Why'd you join? You know, why'd you stick around? It's because of that adventure, being out there in the water. That mission is just so incredible. Get to be part of a terrific team. It just really meets so much of our human, I think, our really human basic desires. Just be out there, be meaningful, go on an adventure, do it with a terrific team. You get some great sea stories that'll last you decades, right? So I could not be happier with the choice that I made to continue on, to start and then continue on as a cutterman. Every time I went back, I crossed the brow. I can remember every time I crossed the brow on the next cutter, I felt a shock of terror and then a shock of thrill, right? Because I knew I was doing the right thing. If I was terrified and thrilled, I knew I was exactly doing the right thing. And I think that's the individual proposition that we have. And as a service, it's everything you say, Admiral. You know, we need we need young, talented, gritty people to go to sea and do the tough missions out on the water that absolutely reap immediate and lasting, both immediate and lasting, visible results to the American public. We're out there stopping IUU, illegal fishing out on the water. That's an incredible mission right there. You're stopping people from taking our resources, and you're protecting those resources for the future of America and the future of the planet, whether you're out there breaking ice and keeping commerce moving. You know, I mean, it's just the value proposition to America goes on and on. The maritime transportation system is absolutely the lifeblood of this country. And so the value proposition for the service is getting those young, gritty, adventure-seeking, morally centered and focused people out there on the water doing that mission and keeping our maritime transportation system working. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So just want to redirect. When I talk about softballs, it's because sea duty for me is such a big deal. And now my personal career was about a third sea duty, about a third actually at multi-mission shore stations, and then a third being a command master chief. But I'll tell you, I am a little bit older now. I've been retired 11 years. Vince has been retired just a few years longer than me. And we could both say, I've met a lot of retirees and veterans in retirement. I've never had one. I mean, folks that think about their lives, even if they were only in 2 years and they were on that ship somewhere, that's what they think about. Now,
That's right.
I understand sea duty is hard, particularly the family separation is difficult. There's a lot of difficult things about the arduousness of sea duty, but I'll tell you, in the end, when you're looking kind of back on more of your life than you have in front of you, it is a huge thing. I think about George's Bank at night, sitting there on the bridge looking out there. Let me tell you, you don't want to miss it in your life on your bucket list, folks. Go ahead, Vince.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm going to echo what Skip said about, the attractiveness and, the romance of sea duty is just something that if you join the Coast Guard in particular and plan to make it a career, as Admiral Jones said, this is a seagoing service, and we need to remind ourselves of that. And why leave an organization without having, the heart of the batting order, so to speak, in terms of one of your best assignments that you can have? And you do one, you want to do another one. But most importantly, it's about our missions, as Captain Collins had pointed out, the very important things of what our Coast Guard mission is. And the other byproduct is, of course, the sea duty, the sea stories. We all will have those wonderful sea stories that are very helpful and important to us, to help us from a morale perspective, help us from a leadership perspective as whole. So with that, I'm going to join in some questions here, and I'm going to start off with Captain Collins, and I'll follow up with Admiral Jones. Let's talk about the sea duty assignments. I've been retired 19 years now. It's hard to believe, it's been 19 years. Although I keep my I keep my fingers and everything. I still think I'm still on active duty, just getting paid less. That's but the number of ships certainly they're sort of diminishing and increasing at the same time. The inside of the FRCs, the NSCs, and then of course the goodbyes to our WHECs. We're seeing our MECs are going to start cutting down a little bit with the OPCs coming on. All these acronyms of sorts that are happening. So that said, let me ask you first, Captain Collins. The sea duty assignments, are we increasing in number of sea duty assignments over the next several years, or will we be decreasing? That's my first part of the question. The second part of it, within those particular assignments, are we sort of narrowing? And what I mean by that, in both looking at officers and enlisted, because we're now coming up with crews that are much smaller than a WHEC, so to speak. Are we narrowing those numbers down that not very many people are going to have an opportunity to go to sea?
I'm gonna take a quick shot at that. And I know Admiral Jones is really got his pulse on this as the head of as the assistant commandant. But let me take a shot. We are growing a number of hulls, and even with the crews being smaller, there will be more sea duty assignments available. The opportunities will be excellent, especially with the Waterways Commerce Cutter coming online. So as we begin to roll these cutters out, much like the NSC, it's going to have a massive impact on our ability to sign people from a diversity and inclusion perspective. So just with the different berthing arrangements, but it's going to be so much better to get to sea as a woman. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities there. So I really believe that opportunities are growing, both from a physical number sense, but also from a D&I perspective. And where the cutters are going, I think we're really taking a great hard look. Again, Admiral Jones, the expert here, but we are taking a great hard look of where we're home porting those cutters, and we're starting to actually take. It's a wonderful thing. The Coast Guard starting to take in, the attractiveness of the location as well. So, for instance, Alameda is an incredibly attractive location because you can go from cutter to cutter. You can do back-to-back assignments, cutter to cutter. You can go back-to-back assignments, cutter to the base, or cutter to Pac area, or cutter to D11, or to the sector in San Francisco. Maybe you get even assigned to the air station or up to Petaluma. So we're starting to see these hubs of assignments for the Coast Guard, which I think is another terrific, actually lends itself to sea duty, even though it's not technically sea duty if you go, cutter, Pac area, cutter. But to be honest, it's great on the family if you don't have to move, and then we get to keep a cutterman around. So I think there's some terrific things happening with the new fleet and the new home porting approach. Over to you, Admiral.
Hey, Captain Collins covered it very, very well. The bottom line is we are looking to grow about 2,700 billets over the next decade that will go to sea, and there will be increased opportunity for mixed gender crews. We're even looking at retrofitting our cutters, including our 65-foot harbor tug and icebreakers, and our 140 icebreaking fleet to help make sure that there's more opportunities across the country for women to serve and to round out crews and bring the best talent available to work on those crews. So those opportunities, along with the new cutters and the technology that comes with it, going to sea doesn't change. Seasickness will still be around, getting bounced and tossed around. The good news is there will be those beautiful sunrises on George's Bank, Master Chief Bowen, that you'll be able to see. But the technology and all that it brings to us with unmanned aerial systems, new sensors, the ability to track vessels, as Captain Collins mentioned, for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. We know that we've got to keep a close eye on the vessels that are literally roaming the world, fishing just outside of countries' EEZs and sometimes creeping into them. And so our ability to detect those vessels and maybe we're not there to interdict them, but we can track them and, in a nationwide stage, shame them for plundering stocks on the high seas. So technology will play in there in a big way. And as Captain Collins mentioned, the Commandant has made a deliberate point to focus on making sure that bases can support large groups of cutters so that we do leverage our support capabilities in places like Charleston, Pensacola, in the future, Seattle, LA Long Beach, Newport, Rhode Island. Those are all areas we're looking at to see what's the best way to deploy our OPCs, our NSCs, our oncoming icebreakers, and making sure that members, their loved ones, have the support they need, especially when those cutters are out to sea.
I like that approach. I like that approach because I think about back in my day when Governor's Island was the place to be. By virtue of you didn't want to move around anywhere because you can bounce ship to shore and so forth. And I'm seeing with such a concept like this, I think is probably a real good step up as far as the sea duty attractiveness part is. And so I'm going to follow up with one more question, starting with you, Admiral Jones, and of course, Captain Collins, you please chime in. But I've been encouraged, and I mean wonderfully encouraged. As I said, I still have my fingers in the Coast Guard pie after 19 years of retirement. But seeing like the recruiting, marketing and efforts that's going that has made some tremendous efforts in showing sea duty and that attractiveness to that, to where I see that we're up front and saying who we are and what we are. So this is more of a comment to me, but I asked particularly to both of you in terms of what else can we do in terms of showing, that sea duty interest of our service, a little bit beyond than what we're doing right now.
Hey, great question, Master Chief. And boy, it's pretty timely for you to be asking me that, because it was a little over 21 years ago that you and I were working together on the first concerted sea duty attractiveness effort when you were obviously Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, and I was a wee lieutenant commander working in the budget shop, and we made the very grave decision of breaking away from the Navy CPA tables and establishing CPA tables for the Coast Guard itself to try to recognize those ships that were the hardest to attract people to serve in. Earlier this year, together, Admiral McAllister and Admiral Bushman chartered the Sea Duty Readiness Council to again take an enterprise look at not only how can we make sea duty more attractive, but how can we make sure that our cutters are more ready than ever, knowing the demands that are being placed upon them, the call for a global Coast Guard to serve on so many fronts. And so we've made a lot of progress, and we have a long ways to go. And we've looked at both monetary, quality of life, and non-monetary incentives to help folks out. First and foremost, I'm happy to report to you that we were able to increase CPay across the board, which was really the first increase since 2001, and help to close that gap with the loss of buying power with that CPay due to inflation. So everyone has a $55 bump on that, and the 23 budget should fully fund that, so that won't be a problem. We've bumped up the service-wide exam points that you get for sea duty. So that depending on whether you're a level 4, which is the second highest cutter, second highest level, or level 5, you have the ability now to get 2.5 or 3 points added to your service-wide multiple and score out for your next advancement. So that certainly has helped a long way. In some places, we've had to resort to monetary bonuses, especially with some of those jobs that are very hard to fill right now, with all the FRCs that are getting out there, and those are phenomenal platforms doing great work, both along the coasts and downrange in the Eastern Pacific, in the Caribbean, over in the Persian Gulf, and soon to be out in Oceania. There's a lot of demand on lieutenants. And so when you're trying to get a lieutenant to agree to come back afloat to serve as an operations officer on a medium endurance cutter, or a national security cutter. If you're trying to get a naval engineer to go back afloat as an engineer officer, we're needing to target some monetary bonuses there to get them on there. Now, as things balance out, hopefully we can find ways to decrease the pressure that we have on the lieutenants going afloat and balance the seagoing a little better over the whole officer pyramid. But that's been one of the issues that we've had to address. Other things we're doing is just those things that I think today's modern workforce demands, which is things like being able to have this type of capability, this video chat capability when you're at sea, so you can be chat with your family. Being able to do basic admin functions like adjust your thrift savings plan from at sea and not have your dual factor authentication mess you up because your cell phone doesn't receive out in the middle of the Eastern Pacific. We've been able to work and solve some of those issues. We've also tried to do a lot to alleviate. It's not just the hardship of being out at sea and being away from home and long days with watches and boardings and custody crews, but when you come back in port, the amount of maintenance and grooming that's required for these very high-end systems really consumes almost every hour of an import. And so trying to be a little more deliberate in the scheduling of cutters so that the cuttermen have the ability to actually plan, and then better coordinating efforts across our engineering folks with our IT folks, our ForceCom inspection and audit folks, to make sure that they're not tripping over each other and placing triple demands on the cutter crews when they're in port. So those have been some of the deliberate things that we're looking at, and I'll let Captain Collins talk about some of the exciting things that we're looking at that could hopefully, nothing final, but we're certainly looking at, could build upon things like our temporary separation program.
Thank you. Captain.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral. I really think, you really hit on some terrific ideas there. If you start with this incredible mission where you can really go get that sense of excitement and adventure, then you want to also follow up with, some of the basics that humans need, right? So just being able to stay in touch with family, like you said, we don't want to, if you're in the middle of this really dangerous mission and you've got it all done and you're high-fiving, and you want to come back to the cutter and not be able to, or you get stuck maybe doing some maintenance because the maintenance wasn't done properly in port, right? Or you can't get the service-wide exam results because the internet's not working. So I think just appealing to that very human sense of being able to do all these exciting things, but then having the support in the place that it's supposed to be, so that you can then put your head down in your rack and say, wow, I just did my job. It's time to rest and get ready to go again. And I've got those mission support aspects in a great place. Having the cutter station in a great place where your family is doing well without you, where you can get childcare, medical care, right? All of those things. It's like this whole package around the human, that can help them just really have a great human experience. But we're so lucky because we start at that fantastic mission in the beginning. I think we've really taken a really hard look at some of our policies for women, and so especially for women, but also policies that are more inclusive for all of our workforces. So we've made updates to tattoo policy, made updates to uniform policies, made updates to hair and grooming policies. We've just done so much. The temporary separation policy has been updated. So we've made all of these policy updates that should be hopefully encouraging a more inclusive workplace, so that the workforce, a larger segment of the workforce, can feel like they belong at sea, because that very human sense of belonging is where we want to be. So I also want to throw in, I think another thing that we own right here in CG1, Admiral, is we're taking a look at the leadership continuum, both for officers. The enlisted leadership continuum is in decent shape, but the officer continuum really has some gaps. So thanks to some terrific funding in FY21, the senior leadership transition course is freshly named and is expanding its throughput. So the goal of that is to really get every officer through that course before they make 05. And we have some workforce teams for you, sir, for the Admiral. We're putting together some great recommendations for him to make some decisions on. But I think that leadership element, so then when people go to sea, right, they're experiencing this terrific leadership climate. I just had the opportunity to tour the Coast Guard Cutter Healy with Captain Ken Boda. And who was he talking to me about afterwards at dinner? Somebody who served with when he was in 02. He was reminiscing sea stories about his leader when he was in 02, the 06 that he worked for. So to me, getting that leadership foundation in place especially for our officers and continuing for our enlisted, so that we can provide that terrific leadership experience, just like Captain Ken Boda had. I think that brings people back.
Well, thanks, Captain. So I'll tell you, Admiral, one thing that you could consider as far as giving those lieutenants a break is a few more Chief Warrant Officer bosun billets on those vessels. And also, quite frankly, the Master Chiefs are ready to step up. I mean, me and Vince will come out of retirement to take one of those babies underway, won't we, Vince? That's a fact. So we have a question from Stephen White. Good afternoon, Admiral, Captain, and Master Chiefs. I couldn't agree more that we are a seagoing service. I understand, though, that they may not be the most desirable billets for some. The Coast Guard has taken steps to incentivize sea duty, but can we look at additional checkpoints for lump incentives, i.e. bonuses at every 5 years, accumulated sea time, the increase in sea pay is a here and now, but we might increase our candidate pool if we throw out a carrot that people can chase. Sounds like they're talking about like a bonus at different points in the sea duty career.
At this point, we're looking, I appreciate the question, Captain White. At this point, we're looking at what are the right ways to recognize. We obviously have several workforce models that are out there. The Navy was the first to get out there with department head bonuses. We've seen that aviation tends to enjoy flight pay throughout the career, even when assigned ashore. That's obviously expensive. We have to be mindful of that. We also have to look at the market forces. If the industries outside the Coast Guard can draw our mariners out, then we obviously have to make sure we'll never be able to match dollar for dollar what the labor rates are for U.S. Merchant Marines. But we need to obviously make sure that the compensation is enough that we don't create an unnecessary draw of that workforce. One of the things we have tried to do, though, and this is great news, is at this point, thanks to a recent NDAA that passed Congress, no longer are members of the Coast Guard required to pay any of the licensing fees to get their merchant mariner's license. We've been able to accredit the sea time and the classwork that cadets do at the Coast Guard Academy, so that if they've completed a minimum amount of sea time and passed all the required courses and tests, that they actually can graduate with a 100-ton license when they graduate. So that helps add to their professional credibility. And as Captain Collins said, we also need to make sure that what are the training and development points in a career to build up leadership, to build up credibility and competency as a mariner as you move up throughout your career, especially at those higher ranks where your time between a sea tour could be as many as 6 years, and you might be getting a little bit, turning into a little bit of a sandpea. And so those are all the things we need to look at. If in the long term, we identify a need that there needs to be a monetary carrot out there, that's certainly something that we can look at. Hopefully, I think like all of us, we first get drawn going to sea to go after the missions, the really cool missions out there, but we end up really settling in on the chance to work with crews and the phenomenal young women and men that are out there getting their sea legs for the first time. And you get to watch them fall in love with the missions and become a very tight member of a crew. So yeah, we're trying to keep as many things on the table and be as innovative as possible. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Captain Collins?
So is there any other planned policy changes or potential policy enhancements. I'm actually maybe for Vince and Admiral Jones. I mean, 21 years ago, you studied this. You're part of I mean, is it the same then as it is now? I mean, certainly family separation, things like that are the same. But now we have all these new platforms. There's some carrots that are here now that we didn't have then, that's for sure. What do y'all think?
Well, I'm going to start first. Start because I'm going to make a comment with regard to the remarks I made initially when I asked the question to Admiral Jones, was about looking at how we have come around. And I think back to 20 plus years ago, the interest of sea duty attractiveness, we had very little to go with. We didn't have a lot in our egg basket to get people enticed into sea duty. And the other problem was, and I'm sure everybody can argue even with today with what the current operational missions responsibilities are compared to 20 plus years ago, but I think they still kind of average out. Getting a brain trust together was very important because it was sort of almost a stand down, I would say. And and Admiral, you could chime in on this, but I think it was almost a stand down that we looked about, and what we were finding very early on was an assignment to sea duty for some people, particularly on the enlisted side of the house, was a punishment versus, hey, wait a minute, this is what we're all about. This is what we need to do. And that was in that whole instance of where, look, we had to put our money where our mouth is. And that was that it became part of the advancement system. And in some sense, it became part of the officer promotion system as well, in the sense of looking at people who took those particular challenging types of jobs. And then, and it was really just sort of defining and not redefining, but better defining what the Coast Guard culture is all about. And we've done that. And I think, the interest of this brain trust of having studies that we do continuously is very, very important. What do you think, Kevin? And Captain, I'll ask you too.
No, I think you're right. We do have to approach it from an enterprise point of view. The Sea Duty Readiness Council, not only covers all the aspects of Coast Guard headquarters, but also has representation from the field, so that folks are able to share what are they seeing out there, and they can, basically make sure. One of the big ones these days, not surprising with all the technology, is how do we make sure that we get all of the folks all the training they need. Cutters are far more complex these days. How do we set the expectation if they're having to work with a group of contractors that are running the drones on board to make sure that they feel that they're welcome and they're best interfacing for mission success? There's a lot of new challenges these days, and we've got to make sure we're staying on top of that. And we'll never quite have the connectivity out at sea that we've got when we're on the beach. But we've got to work very, very hard to not make that fact seem to the cuttermen that they're just being left behind and getting the table scraps. Because when they're out there doing the mission, they are doing things that no one else can do. A virtual presence is actual absence. And so having a cutter on scene is what makes the mission go. Captain?
Yeah, I agree, Admiral. I think, that training piece you mentioned is so key, right? So for our enlisted force, for our junior officers, you're joining and you're being expected to operate this incredibly complex equipment. You also are expected to do an incredibly complex and dangerous mission. So the confidence that you have that comes from being properly trained and properly keeping up that training, what the aviators call MINS, right? They've got MINS they've always got to do. I always thought that was a great term we should steal from the aviators. Like, what are your MINS for boat launches? What are your MINS for boat recoveries? What are your MINS for keeping your boarding team in good shape and relevant and proficient and ready to go on the next boarding? So I think that sense of training and then the maintenance of the proficiency is a great thing to think about for us, especially with the complex mission and the complex platforms. And I also think back to the idea of the studies from Master Chief Patton. And by the way, just a sidebar, I'm not sure we could get Master Chief Patton off the golf course and onto a cutter, but I'm willing to take a thumbs up if it's really true, Master Chief.
He might not fit through that scuttle.
Back to the idea of the studies that you mentioned. One of the things that occurs to me, particularly in my job, is we have some great studies done by Rand on diversity and inclusion, but diversity and inclusion is really about leadership. And where are our best leaders? Where do we most need leadership? It's at sea. So I think there's this opportunity to look at these studies, not as headquarters studies, not as things that just exist for the program office at headquarters, but how is it impacting the very diverse, talented, gritty, exceptional workforce that we're bringing onto our cutters? So I think from your idea of brain trust, like expanding what we mean by, hey, this is a study. Sea Duty Readiness Council, are you studying the RAND URM study? That's a great note for me to take and inject into them, because we've got the D&I here, leadership here, and I can make that contact with them. But I think you're brilliant. If you look back, one last little tidbit for me, if you look back, we did this as the RAND URM study was coming out and we were preparing for the recommendations. You can look back to 1990, was as far back as we looked at either Coast Guard studies or what I call prominent master's theses from some of our officers that enlisted that went out there and did theses. Every single one of them pointed to keeping the foot on the gas, keeping the pedal down on leadership, diversity, inclusion, training initiatives, just keeping that up. So that's there's a takeaway right there. As you look at the CDD Readiness Council, how do we intersect that with the senior leadership training course? How do we intersect their decisions with what Rand just put out? I think there's this great body of work and that brain trust can really look at. That was a great idea, Master Chief.
So risk comes in a lot of forms, and career risk, and this is no disrespect to anybody in any shore job, because I had many shore jobs, but I can tell you that the times where my career could have come to a screeching halt, or much worse, quite frankly, I'm thinking of an incident on the Hammerhead where we almost lost a life once. And quite frankly, I've thought about it many times over the decades since, and what we could have done differently that could have taken that risk out. I'm not sure. It wasn't something that could have been foreseen, as I think the multiple investigation showed. But the point I'm making is there is definitely risk to a career to go to sea and to do these things at sea. And I don't think you can take the risk out of it, but you can enhance the OERs or whatever it takes so the people that are at sea. Captain Collins has led a very, quite frankly, risky career at sea. Some have not. I'm going to get a ton of emails fussing at me about that later. But I think
you're not even factoring in that I sailed with Admiral Jones into that risk equation, so you can bump that up a little bit.
Exactly. So we should be rewarding. I think it was alluded to a minute ago in a statement, but those people that take those officer in charges afloat, those COs afloat, they should be rewarded somehow in that category, because it is a little riskier. I'm telling you, it's just the way it is. But
and we still have responsibility pay and special duty pay that we try to get to our OINCs and our COs. That money is not in any way meant to compensate for the actual risk that they're incurring by taking those units, but that on top of the pride of being able and the satisfaction of being able to lead a crew, I think it's still the best coin that we serve up to the folks that are willing to take on those challenges. Thank goodness. I think that's one huge cultural improvement I've seen in the Coast Guard in my 30 plus years is we do a whole lot better on risk identification and risk communication. Raising our youngest members with assessing a boat launch, a boarding, a flight evolution, helping for the senior folks to communicate the risks that are out there and what could happen, the consequences, the likelihood of a problem, sensitizing the junior members to all be aware and looking out for things going wrong, and hopefully empowering them to speak up if they see something going wrong. I think that's really really important. When we see some failures out there, oftentimes there are many people that saw something going wrong but don't speak up. I think that will always be a challenge, especially in an organization like the military. How do you make sure that the junior most person still feels that they can help speak up? But I am happy, and I would argue that we do a much, much better job with risk management, though when it comes to going to sea, you're right, Master Chief, you can't eliminate it.
Let me ask this question, and I'll start with you, Captain Collins, being that this is around your world of work. In the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, looking particularly in the sea duty aspect. Now, I know part of the answer has to do with just the numbers, in terms of people of color that are in the Coast Guard, and where we are numerically as far as that's concerned. So therefore, as it relates to looking at the representation of diversity in the sea service community, we see those numbers, at least from the outside looking in. I don't see those numbers having any significant increase, or at least enough to see how our representation is. But that's just for me from the outside looking in. But I ask you, how are we doing? What is the representation there? Are we balancing very well, particularly in the sea duty area as far as diversity?
Yeah, great question, Master Chief. And we have a diversity dashboard that we really put a lot of thought into over the last 6-8 months. And fortunately, with Admiral Jones on board, we were able to refine it. And it's up with the Deputy Commandant for Mission Support, and hopefully, with the goal of updating that quarterly or semi-annually. For the Commandant, it looks at our representation in the service. It looks like at our representation at the accessions point, and it looks at representation in key leadership positions, and that's across active duty, reserve, civilian. And for the active duty reserve, we look at both officers and enlisted. So I think we're going to see a better picture, because I think we've kind of locked in a way to look at it. But you're right. We have not made up ground, and we need to make up ground with the representation of both our enlisted and officer workforces to better reflect that of the country. That's our baseline right now that has been approved up through DCMS. We look at we're not looking at propensities to serve, which RAND did, and I think is very helpful. But that's a sort of a proprietary RAND thing. We don't know what's behind their numbers, so we just put on straight up, here's what the population looks like, and so this is our goal and something we should be measuring ourselves against. So we do have to increase our accessions in order to look more like the population of the country that we serve. At the leadership level, we are seeing our otherwise underrepresented minorities doing very well. They are not doing very well across all career fields, and I think that is something that is, to me, a sense of inclusion. I think inclusion matters here. Sorry about my computer light. I think inclusion matters here. This is why I'm very excited about the learning management system. We just launched six training segments on belonging, diversity, inclusion from a emotional intelligence perspective, and a couple others. But it does just get back to that sense of belonging. I mean, I had the opportunity and to serve quite a few tours across, just because I did some 1-year tours in there across XOs, and I just did so many out briefs, right? I just never let a shipmate leave without a good talk. And I cannot tell you, I mean, I could to a person say that every person that was not giving, like a 5-star review, it was that sense of being part of the team, that sense of belonging, true inclusion. So the representation we got to get better at, and the way that we really harness the power of that representation, harness the power of that diversity inclusion, is by creating that sense of belonging all the way down to the non-rate. I got to tell my one non-rate story. First big Cutter XO tour, checking out a just spitfire of a young man, African-American. He's going to OS school. He had been just like, I mean, just like, all I can say is just energy, full of energy, was going to this great A school. And I thought this checkout was going to be like, loved it here, ma'am. So excited to go to school. And he said he had a bad time. And I didn't know it. And I was really, really struck me and stays with me. This is a little over 10 years ago now. that somehow he didn't feel inclusion and belonging. And in my like shock, all I could think of was to say, I said, was there anyone that made you feel like you belonged here? And he named one chief. And I stay in touch with that chief to this day, because that guy was making the young people of color feel included on a cutter that, you know, breaks my heart. I was the XO of, but he was making the difference. And so I think that's really something, I love that sea story, because it's, you know, there's a silver lining there. There was one leader on that boat that was making a difference. And here this young man was launched into a terrific career. He could have just said, hey, this is a no-go for me in the Coast Guard. But thanks to that, she made a difference in this young man's life and others. And like I'm telling you, this guy was talent, Spitfire talent. So we're lucky that we had that chief doing what he did. And so to me, that is harnessing, you know, the recruiter brought him in. We've got to harness the talent. We've got to make them feel included and belonging. We got to launch them into the rest of their career. And I'm very appreciative of that chief. I learned a lot of lessons from that chief and the young man.
Now the Coast Guard.
That's great to hear. Admiral, anything you want to add to that?
I would add to that, and something that I think is truly really important to point out about going to sea is, look, we have a need for a lot of folks to go to sea, and we do want to get as many people out there as possible. That's why we try to get so many academy grads out there, even though only 10 to 15% will actually have careers there. That grounding in the sea, that chance to be part of a team, really is something that can set up someone well for the rest of their career. As Master Chief Bowen mentioned in the beginning about the folks that just remember those 2 years they spent afloat 40 years ago, that really is key. And so that means if that's the common experience that we want folks to have, you know, face the ocean together, function well on there, accomplish great things out there, we do need to work extra hard to make sure that, as challenging as that tour is, we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that everyone has a chance to contribute and feel like they belong. And the ocean is a great leveler. You take folks on Eagle, you take folks from across the country, folks from all the way from Tampa, Florida, all the way to Topeka, Kansas, out to sea. And no matter how accomplished they were in sports or academics, when you get them out at sea, it is a great leveler, and it's a great chance to contribute together to get that ship safely from one port to another, climbing in the rigging, handling the lines and the all. It's challenging enough just to be humbled by the ocean, its majesty, its power. You do not need to make it difficult for a young man or woman to acclimate and feel like they're part of the team. So that's something where leaders, chiefs messes, wardrooms, first class petty officers, upper class cadets, they all have to work together to make sure that folks are given the tools they need to find out what they're made of, realize that they can surmount this with the grit that Laura Collins speaks of, and then excel and take pride in what they've done. They should not ever leave thinking, wow, I survived that. Though we know there's many that's been their experience. So we got to keep working on that.
But the chiefs can make a difference. And I appreciate that it was a chief, but there should be more than just one of them. So all of these great new platforms, we have FRCs, which I'm personally vested in with Bollinger Shipyards, but Vince and I were just at the Emlyn Tunnel commissioning in Philadelphia just last week. That was a totally awesome thing. But for everybody's, I'm also involved with other commissionings, including National Security Cutter. I'm a proud honorary plank owner of the Stone here. I'll show you my plaque. So we've got all of these things, and you mentioned lieutenants and FRCs. I'm sure there are other, besides just the sheer numbers as we grow the sea duty force, there are other consequences of that to the HR system besides the lieutenants that you mentioned. And I just thought you might have an opportunity to go into that a little bit. Other parts of the workforce as we grow these different platforms. We have the icebreakers, the OPCs coming out. Pretty big stuff.
No, you're absolutely right, Master Chief. And there's a lot of concerns on that. Our two critical ratings right now are rescue swimmers and our culinary specialists. As you know, obviously, those culinary specialists are the number one key enabler, both from nutrition as well as morale for our folks out on the cutters. And it's tough to get enough folks into that rating to support that. We've also seen challenges with just maintaining diversity across ratings. We've actually lost diversity for both rescue swimmers and surfmen when it comes to women. We have fewer out there today than we had 10 years ago. And so those are some challenges that we need to get at. OSs, who are absolutely critical to keeping combat information centers and bridges running, they are a stressed rating, and we've got to find ways to help improve their career paths, because even though they do have technically a pretty good sea to shore rotation, they go from a bouncy command center to a stable command center. And so sitting in dark rooms with no natural light, whether it's ashore or afloat, is not necessarily, does not make it a whole career. And so, yeah, we've got challenges across the board. We can only expect as these new assets come on, we are taking a look at the technical rating review, which the Personnel Readiness Task Force is taking on to take a look and see, do we have the right mix of ETs, ITs, ISs? Do we need to create a cyber rating? And almost again, to Master Chief Patton, a reprise of the Joint Rating Review is, do we have the right rates there, and do we have the right numbers to make sure, even to this day, we still have challenges. If you're a cutter-centric bosun's mate, you still are probably not on an even footing with someone who's an ashore bosun's mate. It becomes challenging if you're focusing on that OOD qual over the coxswain qual. So there are areas where we, besides just the lieutenants, there's areas we need to continue to work on that. And as Captain Collins remarked earlier, when it comes to folks that want to get on with other parts of just a full human life, when it comes time to have families, temporary separation is one program, allows folks to get out 2, now up to 3 years out and come back in. But when they're out, they get no benefits or no military pay. They can affiliate with the reserves as part of that. But whether it's active, the cell res, or inactive ready reserve, that's their choice. But they lose that health care. So we are looking at a program that the Air Force and the Navy are using that allow folks to perhaps take a pause in their career, but still keeps them more closely affiliated with the active duty component, so that they actually do get, while they're not getting full pay, they are getting full health and dental benefits. And that may work better for folks that want to take a pause, start a family, and then come back in without giving up those critical health benefits during that time. So, yeah, the challenges remain. A lot of exciting stuff happening, but the challenges definitely remain. And just trying to recruit folks and get them interested in serving in the military, specifically the Coast Guard, remains one of our biggest challenges today.
So the part of the Joint Ratings Review that I've long thought was completely wrong. Bring back those quartermasters, Admiral. So we only have a few minutes left, and I'd like to go to first Captain Collins, and then Admiral, and then Vince for some parting remarks.
Thank you, Master Chief. Just a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak to SNA and the audience in general. I think that, I don't know how many people know Captain Tom Krabs, but one of the best retirements I've ever been to, he talked about going to sea. And it was this whole thing where if you want to go on a big adventure and you want to do it with terrific people, this is what you do in life. And I just felt like he retired. And at that time, I was also a captain. So he wasn't speaking to me as a young person. But when he retired, I mean, he absolutely had, you could see it in everyone that was there. You could see it in his words. You could see it in all the emotion. He absolutely had 100% satisfaction and with everything that he had dedicated his life to. Because by the time you retire, sometimes that's your youth. You dedicated your youth to something, and he absolutely dedicated his youth to the right thing. And I'll circle back to Captain Ken Boda, reflecting on the 06 that he served with as an 02 being the biggest impact. I mean, we get that chance so early to have that impact on people and say, this is cool, come back and do it again. It's totally worth it. If you're talented, you're gritty, you have a sense of adventure, you want to belong somewhere, you want to tell sea stories 3 or 4 decades from now, this is the place to be. So, I think keeping that in mind, that's what happened to me. I just stumbled into a great second command, especially where I just had a terrific time. So I just kept coming back because I love crossing that brow and being terrified and then proving what a thrill I had really signed up for. So thanks for having me.
And thanks, Laura. I can only echo the comment she made. I came into the Coast Guard to be able to do more work on boats. Then I fell in love with the Coast Guard's missions, and then eventually, just craved the next opportunity to be out there with the Coast Guard crew. Having just left District 7, I only got 6 days underway, 3 on the James and 3 on the Isaac Mayo, but still immediately brought back all the memories of being on a crew, teaching the young cuttermen about all the aspects of shipboard life. It is incredibly rewarding. It's exhausting. Thank goodness sailors somehow manage to wear rose-colored glasses and look back on and be able to tell the tough stories with a smile and really, and tell the really good stories with a tear, because there's just nothing like going out there for satisfaction day to day. And as tough as it is to be away from your family, I think your family members, especially your spouses, know they can see in you the satisfaction of doing that work. And so we owe it to as many coasties as we can the chance to at least experience it, one tour at some point in their career, and just so that if they have that experience and can share that aspect of being in the Coast Guard. And if it does light a fire and enthusiasm to go back and do it time and again, then so much the better. Thanks so much for dedicating to Master Chiefs and to the SNA staff for sponsoring today's conversation, because obviously, if you haven't noticed, it's something that I think all 4 of us are very passionate about. So we really relish the opportunity. Semper Paratus.
Thank you, Admiral. And I'll just make a quick closure with, my 30-year career, nothing that I cherish most. I mean, the holder of a Distinguished Service Medal as an enlisted person is pretty awesome, but nothing's more awesome than having a cutterman's pin. And I not only just cherish it, that's my #1 award as far as I'm concerned. And that's primarily because of everything that has been said by both you, Admiral, and Captain, and to Skip. We talk an awful lot about this joyous romance of the sea and the love of what we do that ties in with being assigned to an afloat unit and so forth. So it's something that, this is near and dear to all of us. It's near and dear to all of us because of our love for the Coast Guard as a whole. And I personally want to thank each of you, to the Admiral and to Captain. Great seeing you all. And it's great to be part of this as a whole. So to my partner in crime, Skip, I turn it over to you to close it down.
So be part of the action, www.navysna.org. Don't let the Navy SNA part throw you off, because cuttermen are a huge part of it, a growing part of it, a vibrant part of it. Anyone can join, but come join us. We have a national symposium coming up January 11 through 13 at the Hyatt Regency in Crystal City. It's a huge thing. Stop by, free to active duty. Please come out and join us. But you want to talk about mentoring, professional development, this is where it's at. this is where you'll get that leadership, and hopefully we'll develop those chiefs so there'll be more of them at your next unit, man, that are going to actually run things the way they should be run for all of our members. So thanks, everyone. That was awesome, and I appreciate you being here, Admiral and Captain. Thank you.